Hey everyone, welcome to LED Live. On this episode, we're going to talk about depression. We've got Chad and Fadia Kreuzer with us from Anchor Point Films. If you've ever been depressed, what do you do?
Find out on this episode of LED Live.
All right, welcome Chad and Fadia. It's good to have you here again, and we've got Michelle on the show with us this time.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about depression. So, have either of you ever had depression before?
I have, yeah. It all started for me. It started in. Actually, I was in Iceland, and while in Iceland, had stomach trouble. Actually, Fadia had stomach trouble. Another friend working with us, Nathaniel, we all had stomach trouble, and for about 2 years had stomach trouble. And mine all stemmed from partly, the weather is rough there, but the other aspect was this gut trouble. And now I didn't know then, and the gut-brain connection wasn't as popular back then. But study after study has been coming out on the effects of what's going on in the gut and how it can affect the brain. And that's how I became depressed. So you have a video
on that, right?
I do, yeah. Yes, yeah.
We'll put the link in below. Check that out. We have a video from them about the gut-brain connection. So if you want to learn more about that, we briefly touched on it in the last program. You can also get the link to that as well, but that we can talk about another time, or you can check out the video. So, problem with your gut?
Yeah, had a problem with my gut, and depression is not only a gut issue. It can be. That can be That can be a major causative factor. But there's various other things that can cause depression, toxicity, and various things. But we're going to get into some of those in more detail. Things that people can actually do to implement to reverse. So I had it for about 10 years off and on. Even after coming back to the States, my stomach didn't fully heal after that. And then I would have seasonal depression. And after 10 years actually of this off and on, I was still traveling the world, still producing documentary films, still exercising and eating what most people would consider a pretty good diet, but it wasn't working for me. And then I found something out, and I'll share more about that later on, about that actually ended up helping me.
So what about you, Fadia? Did you go through the same thing? I mean, both had a stomach bug.
I had some issues there, but not to the extent that he did. And mine, over the years, more was situational. I had an older brother get killed in a car accident, and from that,
he was killed by a drunk driver.
He was killed by a drunk driver, so it was just very tragic, and all that. And you go through these slumps and things like that. But in general, not to the same degree that he was dealing with. Yeah.
What about you, Michelle? You're like always happy in the office, always smiling. You ever had to deal with depression?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
Well, at least
that's
as far
awesome.
as I can notice. No.
How about you, bro?
Yeah.
Definitely.
You have. Yeah.
I mean, definitely.
Yeah.
Is probably as early as I can remember. It's been an up and down, up and down, up and down. So yeah.
Is that right?
I don't know if there's anything necessarily cyclical, like time of year.
Yeah.
But I definitely have triggers.
Yeah.
And there can be days where it's hard to stay up and positive. And a lot of times a lot of times you use things or people even to help cope with that. Like my wife is very helpful at coping. If we were to ever both get sad at the same time, it would be a very bad thing in our house. But usually we can, help prop the other one up. So that's good, but it can't be the only thing because humanity can fail.
Yeah.
Other things, I don't know, but what I find in myself is typically you just don't ever want to go to wherever those triggers are.
Yeah.
It's like it's like masking the symptoms. It's there, it's like lurking in the background, but you just kind of suppress it and keep it back. So to date, have never been able to kick it. There are good days and bad days.
I was thinking, and if you don't mind me saying, you had shared that you have some gut issues also, and that can be, even though we don't associate it, because we think our depression is only psychological, we think it's just thought processes, and that is part of it. I'm not negating that fact, but it's amazing how many physiological things can impact the brain so that it causes thoughts, and we think the thoughts are what's causing the problem, but sometimes it's actually not the thoughts that cause the problem. Sometimes it's actually the body is causing a hormonal release or some kind of physiological process that makes us feel bad, and when you feel bad, what do you have? you have bad thoughts, typically
Yeah.
go along with it.
Yeah.
And so we think the thoughts are the problem, and sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not. And so we're going to talk about a mixture of things as we go through. And one of the first things is one that is probably not the primary thing, but it is something to think about, is you can potentially improve your mood with negative ions. Now, what is that all about, negative ions? So we're going to watch a video clip. My wife and I, Fadia, we produce a documentary film series. Actually, we have one series, but then this particular individual documentary is called Ancient Health. It's like an 1.5-hour documentary about the longest living people in the world, longest living cultures, and we'll show a video clip. This is just a, I don't know, couple minute clip or something about negative ions. This is quite interesting.
Let's talk a little bit about air. Air being one of the, the acronym in New Start, the A is for air.
And of course, we're speaking about good fresh air. What's surprising to many people in the urban environments in which the majority of the world's population lives is that many of us are deprived of this very important commodity.
There's actually good air and bad air.
We know that foul air in the cities will, for example, double heart attack rates, which is a big problem.
If you go into a congested city environment, you actually don't, you kind of feel a little down. You're a little gloomy. The air is just not as fresh as compared to going along a mountain stream with this river that's cascading down the mountains and the birds are singing. The sense that you have there, and why is that?
In these environments, there are negatively charged air ions.
And we can go out on the trails and just breathe in just good air, good quality air.
The air around waterfalls, lakes, oceans, pine trees, cedar trees, mountains, that negatively charged air is good for you. It's actually positive for you.
Have you ever noticed how good you feel after a thunderstorm or after being by the ocean surf? The reason again is that these environments create and have the highest concentration of negative ions available.
These negatively charged ions have a mood elevating effect.
Out there, the light rain, when the rain comes down, the negative ions go up. All of that fresh air, anytime you can get out in the fresh air, you're going to be better for it mentally and physically.
The brain needs oxygen. The nerve cells need oxygen to function adequately. And when you're not sitting up straight, when you're not breathing deeply, then your tissues are going to be lacking oxygen and you're going to start feeling tired and fatigued.
When we have this, oxygenation that's increased, it really does improve our mental ability and you just feel much better. I mean, you feel like, man, my mind is clear.
And so it's very important that we get that fresh air as we want to improve our mental health and our cognitive performance.
So getting enough fresh air is actually valuable, and the quality of air is also very important.
So my prescription for health would include getting out into nature. Get out after a thunderstorm and walk. Go by the ocean, surf. Go to an area that has up in the mountains with lots of trees. Get the best out of the time that you exercise.
The thing is, you can combine these things. If you're drinking water, you're out in the sunshine and you're exercising out in nature and you're getting fresh air, you didn't have to think, well, I just got 4 of the 8 natural laws and I thought I was just walking out in nature.
It's quite interesting, and people don't think about it, that fresh air, which has these negatively charged ions, can actually be beneficial to our levels of happiness. They've actually done a specific study on this in a office situation. People didn't know, and they began to pump in. There's actually these negative ion generators, like machines that can literally, because typical indoor air, there's probably several reasons, whether it's the electronics or maybe heating system, various things potentially can create negative or positively charged ions, or maybe even just our breathing. So without a good open air source from the outdoors or a negative ion generator, which most of us don't have, you're not getting this good fresh air that you need. And so doing this day in, day out, hour after hour after hour can actually be kind of depressing. And so when they began to pump this into a office situation, it ended up having beneficial impact to the cognition of the people that were inside the office area. And so for most of us who probably aren't going to buy a negative ion generator, we can open the window. You know,
Yes,
you can do
exactly.
something where you can get
Yeah.
good fresh air in the, you know, in the actual building itself. So it's a very simple one. But another thing is that even with sleeping,
So when you're sleeping, it's good to have a window open, so you're constantly having that air flow, and not just fresh air, but also cool air. It's important that you have that cool air coming in, and it has to be dark and quiet. These are all things that help you have better sleep, because sleep is so important to our mental health.
yes.
And
Yeah.
so wherever we're at, it doesn't matter what the weather is, we always crack the window open at least a
Even
little
in
bit.
Michigan, it can be
Yeah.
like 10 degrees outside, and we normally, unless we're in somebody's house and we're like, man, they're gonna get angry because the air conditioner, or the heater is gonna turn on so much. But like, you know, if you got a wood stove or something, you heat your house that way, you don't have to worry about it. You crack the window and you're cool. So, but having good fresh air, it's a simple thing, but these principles of reversing depression, not that I think this is the key, this is just the first thing we're looking at, but the more you put these things together, you know, you can have a form of synergy as they come together. So one of them you may think, that's not a big deal, but hey, if you're depressed, why not do everything you can? Give your body and your brain the best fighting chance so that you can hopefully, you know, by the grace of God, overcome this particular issue. And this is from a book called Healthful Living. And it says, air is the free blessing of heaven. The word heaven, you know, can mean this, you know, it could, you know, sure, you can think of heaven, but it can also mean the sky, you know, like we have this great blessing calculated to electrify the whole system. And that's what we see here, that it has this, you know, great blessing. The effects produced by living in close, ill-ventilated rooms are these. The system becomes weak and unhealthy, the circulation is depressed, the blood moves sluggishly through the system because it is not purified and vitalized by the pure, invigorating air of heaven, or the fresh air, and the mind becomes depressed and gloomy, while the whole system is enervated, and fevers and other acute diseases are liable to be generated. So getting that fresh air is just so very beneficial. It's something that simple, and the good thing is unless you're buying a negative ion generator, it's free.
What about having plants in the house?
You know, that probably is. I haven't looked at a study specifically on it, but it would make sense, because we know that plants are, you know, they're going to give off oxygen. We're giving them our carbon dioxide. So I'm guessing you probably do get some of the negative ions generated by it. I've just never looked at a particular study on it, but it makes sense.
You know, you and I were talking about Australia and having visited there, and I think that's one of the contributing factors, because anytime I go to the beach, I just love being at the beach, you know. It always feels relaxing.
Doesn't it?
It always feels refreshing.
Like you feel more peaceful after going to the ocean.
Yeah, and so you think about, most of Australians are probably going to be living pretty close to the coast.
That's right.
And they're getting that influx of fresh air, that nice cool breeze, you know, that you're talking about all the time. And California, of course, being another one of those places.
Yeah.
And, you know, not all Californians are you know, free of depression or anything, but I think that helps, given the high amount of stress that they have and all that. So I just love going to the beach. It's very relaxing.
It really is.
But being in the mountains too, you know, same kind of effect.
You know, secondarily, some of us have heard of SAD, seasonal affective disorder, and roughly like 6% of Americans struggle with this, that when the fall months begin to move in, you have less and less sunshine in.
Depression.
Yeah, they become more depressed. And so one of the things that we can do that, see, if you live down in the southern portions of the country, like, you know, we're in Tennessee right now, we live up right now, we're in the process of moving to Michigan from South Dakota. In those northern regions, you cannot get enough sunshine to actually produce vitamin D in the winter. So you can get out in it and the sun can hit you, but it's not high enough into the sky to hit enough that it can actually produce vitamin D. So, but we're not talking specifically about vitamin D here, but you just have a lower level of light that time of year. And so many people become depressed in the fall to winter season, seasonal affective disorder. And it's very common, but the front line, research shows that the front line, the best method of overcoming it, or the most popular, and it works fantastically, is light therapy. And since some regions of the world, like we've lived in Iceland, we were just in Norway a few weeks ago, and in these regions, especially when you get up further, like in Norway, you have like weeks and weeks and weeks where the sun literally doesn't come over the horizon. It's dark non-stop, you know, in the winter. They'll get a little bit of like bluish to the sky, but it doesn't actually produce sunlight. And so you can imagine how prone people are to depression in those kind of situations. And so you can't get the sun. You can't just like, oh, I'll just go out in the sun. So what do?
So you get these light boxes, and they're affordable now. They used to be more expensive, but now they're affordable. You can get them online.
I'm guessing 30, 40, 50, 60, maybe 100, but you can get it cheaper.
You can get it cheaper. And you don't look at it directly, just like you don't look at the sun directly. You put it off to the side, and you let it hit the side of your eyes, you know, where it's hitting your eyes, but not directly. And you can just sit in front of it for like a half hour in the morning to get yourself on a circadian rhythm.
Okay.
And you should buy a box that says at least 10,000 lux. That's L-U-X. So 10,000 lux is something that'll be beneficial.
And you can have it during devotions, or you can sit and read your Bible in the morning or something.
So does it kick your body into vitamin D production?
It doesn't. I believe they have it. You're not supposed to be getting vitamin D actually from those particular lights. It's actually just supposed to be lighting the eyes enough that it somehow creates, you know, that happy feeling you have in summer. You know, so it's just giving that experience and not actually creating vitamin D. So this doesn't seem to be so much a vitamin D factor as it is just the actual light hitting the eyes.
Because you need the cycle of light and dark. And so places like Iceland, where they just have short amount of light, and like you said, you don't see the sun, you just see light, and then it's gone.
Yeah, how do you know when to sleep?
You don't know when to sleep. And then the same thing happens in the summer. It's just light all the time.
24 hours a day, and
So
it's
it's like-
hard to sleep at night.
It's extreme both ways, because then in the summer you're up all the time.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can understand how things could get off for you, you know,
for sure.
for your timing. So it's important that you also get to bed at a good time so that your melatonin will hit a peak before midnight. Because you know how it is when you go to sleep after midnight. When you wake up, you you could have like 10 hours of sleep and you'll never
You don't
feel
feel good.
No. Because there's a time you're supposed to go to bed at least like 3 hours before midnight or something like that, and then
If you want peak.
if you want that peak of the melatonin to go up. If you get to bed after that, the peak won't hit as much, and so you don't get that. And
You
melatonin
can still get it
is
before
like,
midnight, but it's best even further, especially for people who are depressed. And that's actually our last point that we're hitting on now, is that getting to bed closer to 9 o'clock, especially if people are depressed, especially if they struggle with depression, that early to bed can make, you know, it can make a significant difference.
Yeah, you think about all the times you may not have had enough sleep, how you are the next day.
Yeah.
Or anybody, it's just like you feel like a bear.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah.
that's how I feel, for sure.
So imagine all the Americans. We know. I think it's provably, you know, accurate that most Americans don't get enough of sleep. I think I've seen that in multiple news reports, and so we're just a bunch of crabby people.
Yeah,
walking around,
and it affects
rubbing off on each other.
Yeah, it affects several areas of our life. And you know, this light, obviously natural light is the best, but once again, there are situations where you can't get it. So that's where these light boxes come in. If somebody's used to working indoors all the time and they can't get it, even if it is outside, they can still consider the light boxes if that's the option for them. You know, it's interesting because the Bible actually said thousands of years ago in the book of Ecclesiastes, this is awesome. It says, truly the light is sweet, and a pleasant thing it is for the eyes to behold the sun. I mean, they recognized thousands of years ago that there's something pleasant about the sun hitting your eyes. Now, not like they were all staring up at the sun or something like that, but meaning just, you know, it just feels good. You're out there in the sun and you just, you know, obviously you feel nice on the skin too, but something about hitting the eyes, it's a pleasant thing. It's just brings happiness to our life. And so, go.
I was just thinking it's such a fitting metaphor for Christ. You know, he says, I am the light of the world. You think about this thing that we all need everywhere, you know, shining down upon us to give us different physiological and emotional effects.
Yeah.
And God is saying, I'm the same way. Like, you need me like you need light in your life to be, you know, to help in all aspects.
It's like you can live without it to a degree, but it's like you live much better with it.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
You know, just kind of a review of, so we've looked at negative ions, we've looked at light therapy, and the next one that we look at here is basically about a plant-based diet. And this is interesting. I'm going to show a video clip, but before I do, I want to share with you some very interesting things about Daniel chapter 1, we talked about this a little bit on the other video, but it's quite interesting. When you look at the history of Daniel, Daniel was a young Hebrew boy taken from Babylon, which was just outside of modern-day Baghdad, Iraq, and so he's taken out of the capital of the Empire of Babylon. He was taken he was taken from Jerusalem to Babylon. I should correct myself. He was taken from Jerusalem, where he was from. He was a young Hebrew boy, taken to Babylon. While he was there, he was put into a 3-year educational system, which really would be kind of nice because he gets to be one of like the, scholars of Babylon, one of the wise men of Babylon. And he was given the best food that the king could give to them. And obviously most cultures believe the very best food that makes you the healthiest is meat, right? A meat-based diet is what you want to eat to be healthy. But Daniel, he knew that some of that meat might be the meat that he wasn't supposed to eat according to the Bible. So Daniel and his friends in chapter 1 decide to go on a plant-based diet. And, it says, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. So he said, I want to avoid this stuff. I'm not going to defile myself with this food. And then it says in verse 12, test your servants. The New Translation says, prove your servants, I beg of you, for 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Now, pulse is it's things that are grown from seeds. So Daniel and his friends go on a 10-day total plant-based diet. The people around them say, no, you're going to get unhealthy. If you just eat plants, you're going to be totally unhealthy. And it ends up that Daniel and his friends actually get healthier. They look healthier, and they end up having better cognition. Their mental state becomes actually better. And we see that in chapter 1, verse 18. It says, now at the end of the days, the king had said he should bring in these students before him. Then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in. He brought the students in before the king, who was Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. And the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Those were his friends who chose to eat a plant-based diet. Therefore they stood before the king in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them. He found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. So what Daniel and his friends ate, what went into their gut, affected their brain. Once again, this gut-brain connection. And this I find amazingly fascinating. This right here is an article that's on the National Institutes of Health website, the United States National Library of Medicine. And the title of this article is Evolution of Clinical Research, A History of Before and Beyond by James Lynn. So the article is, they're looking at the history of scientific studies. Okay. And this is what the article says. It says 562 BC, that's over 2,500 years ago, the world's first clinical trial is recorded in the book of Daniel in the Bible. And then it refers to it, goes on to talk about the experiment, right? And so we know what the experiment was. The experiment was Daniel and his friends will go on a plant-based diet. You have a control group, that's all the other wise men of Babylon. They stay on a standard Babylonian diet, and the one group ends up being healthier, their mind functions better, and Daniel lives, we know, a very long time because he lived till the time of Medo-Persia. And when you know the history, we realize Daniel lived to be quite an old man, which is what happens today. Statistically, plant-based eaters are the longest living people in the world today. And I want to show you, so you say, okay, that's a 2,500-year-old study. I mean, does it still work today, right? I mean, like, oh, that's kind of cute, but I'm going to show you a video clip from our documentary called Ancient Health, where we go around and record health professionals looking at the science and the research. And this is from our documentary, Ancient Health. It literally changed my life. It was actually the process of producing this film that helped me to overcome the depression. It literally changed my life. And this is just a kind of a clip from this, so we'll show you a clip.
But the main thing that folks should be concerned about is how long you live and how likely you are to get disease. And there have been 3 major studies published on this subject, big meta-analyses. And these meta-analyses, and only 3 big ones have been published, they show consistently that low-carb diets, in other words, low plant food diets, high animal food diets, consistently they show that they're associated with more heart disease and more death, more mortality.
If you look around the world and you look at these people in the blue zones, The average percentage of calories from carbs ranges from about 50% to about 80%. Carbs are not the enemy, refined carbs are the enemy.
There have been a number of recent studies. Dr. Bieshold out of Phoenix, Arizona, first she did an observational study showing that plant-based diet actually significantly improves your depression and anxiety stress score. It's called a DASS score.
So the mood actually is improved when you get the right amount of carbohydrates, but also the right type of carbohydrates and less protein.
Then she followed up with an interventional study, and that's where she took people who are not on a plant-based diet and put them on a plant-based diet for 2 weeks. She also put them on a plant-based diet plus fish for 2 weeks to see which one would be superior. And it turned out the fish diet wasn't any more superior than the carnivore diet. But the plant-based diet, significant, dramatic changes, statistically significant changes in just 2 weeks in their mental ability.
We see when people go on this diet and drink plenty of water, get plenty of rest, follow these natural remedies, that it's just like something snaps in their brain, and it doesn't take like weeks or months.
Plant-based diet is key in our program for depression and anxiety recovery. The results are outstanding because it's a comprehensive approach. It's not just diet. We also utilize exercise, and we're utilizing correct thoughts and a lot of different modalities. But the diet is a key element.
I went on a plant-based diet about 5 weeks ago.
It's amazing because even if they had not told me he had the diet change, the first thing I noticed was he was bringing his schoolwork in.
And my teacher has actually been bragging on how much better I've been behaving since I've been on the diet.
In class, he wasn't getting as distracted, that he was paying attention, he was able to listen more closely, he was being alert, his discernment was better, he was more diligent, everything.
I can pay attention more. My mind is more clear since I've been on the diet.
It's just a huge improvement. And I also noticed he lost a lot of weight. But the main things I noticed was behavioral.
A study in a middle school has showed clearly that switching the menu from animal source to plant source diet almost eliminated absenteeism, increased and enhanced attention and homework performance and performance at school. It almost eliminated acts of violence as well as teen pregnancies.
And so they just feel better. Everywhere the blood flows, everywhere that perfect circulation goes, they feel better. Not just in body, but in mind. Clears up their thoughts even.
And every single day since I've been on a plant-based diet, the clarity continues to increase and my face continues to look younger, and my body feels like I look more vibrant. I've looked at pictures of myself before and after, and I look 5 years older, even just 10 months ago, than I do now.
What we eat does get turned into neurotransmitters. It actually helps us or hurts us, depending on what we're eating in regards to our brain chemistry. And it plays a vital role in health of the brain.
They'll say within 3 or 4 days, they seem to have clarity. They're alert. They listen in class better. They absorb more, and they do better on their tests.
The fog has been lifted out of my head. I think clearer. I've got better ideas, I believe. I can put 2 and 2 together faster, and just in general, I'm happier.
In fact, diet alone, studies show that diet alone will reduce your depression and anxiety scores by half just by dramatically changing your diet to a plant-based. And so that's significant. Now, we go for more than just half, and so that's why we have a whole program that includes more than this. But just the diet alone will make a big difference.
You don't have to choose between high quality living and longevity. It's the same program. The same New Start approach to living helps you live longer, and it helps you live better.
So a couple of questions. Yeah. One, where did we get that documentary?
Oh yeah, so our website is anchorpointfilms.com. And so it's a documentary called Ancient Health, and much of what we're talking about in this message is not only on this documentary, but separately we have a whole video series on the gut-brain connection, which also has a section of it on reversing depression. Part of it is on the gut-brain connection and that's effect, and then some of it also talks about some of the stuff that we'll be talking about here, but there's much more information on there.
Okay. So anchorpointfilms.com, and we'll put the link in the description below. Next question is, it seems like there's increasing amount of scientific evidence to support that a plant-based diet is the way to go. But there's also an overwhelming consensus in the Christian community that, you can eat whatever you want, it doesn't matter. But we don't see Daniel doing that. In fact, it seems like Daniel's very cognizant of the fact that I can make a choice. And he realizes that between what God has asked him to do and what he can do, there's going to be a vast difference.
Yeah, I think there's, even within the Bible, one of the great things I love about God and the Bible is the recognition of choice. I mean, you have back in the book of Joshua, the question goes forth, choose you this day whom you will serve. Meaning, God doesn't force anybody. Nobody has to follow God, right? And even God's law, in Deuteronomy 6:24, where it says that God gave us all his commandments, all of his statutes for our good always. So the commandments are for our good, but then the next part of the verse says that he might preserve us alive as it is this day. Meaning, in God's principles that he gives in the Bible, there's a longevity factor. Meaning that we are more likely to live a long life if we choose to follow God's principles. Now, you don't have to.
Sure.
Meaning, like, if you don't want to, it's not like the Bible says you have to eat a plant-based diet. I don't believe that it forces. I mean, we see people in the Bible, even Jesus ate, fish at least. We know that. But the reality is, animals also weren't as toxic back then as they are now.
Sure.
The reality is, even like, I was just looking at something yesterday on farm raised fish are actually more toxic than ocean fish. Yet ocean fish, many of them still have high levels of PCBs or mercury and these kind of things. And so you didn't have that level of toxic nature in the oceans and on the world back then. So part of it today is people may say, yeah, but you get toxins from plants too. You do, but not nearly to the same level as you do from the animals that are eating those things, and it accumulates in the body of the animal, and then so it bioaccumulates or biomagnifies it in the animal. Then you eat it, then you have higher levels of that. So
and the plant kingdom has the ability to have a way to counteract the poisons, right? So there's antioxidants and all types of things in them
that can help us
shed those things. For example, they say that brown rice in particular, coming from Arkansas in that area,
southern states,
it has an increase in arsenic.
Because they used to put arsenic on the cotton fields as a pesticide, and it worked. But the problem is it put arsenic in the soil. So then when you raise rice on those fields, what do you get?
Really
the rice actually sucks it up. So then as you eat it, you're getting arsenic in your food. But the fascinating thing is
that another plant helps counteract that and pull it out of your body, which is sweet potatoes. If you eat sweet potatoes with that rice, they're high levels. The only other thing that's higher, I think, is chickens, right? Chicken has a high level of arsenic. And so anyway, eating whole foods, in particular sweet potatoes with your brown rice, is a better.
It can counteract the toxins. No, we're not saying to eat toxins. That's not the goal.
No.
But
it's
also,
just not the same as the animal food.
It's a lower risk.
It's a lower risk.
It is.
Because the animal food isn't giving you antioxidants. It's not giving you these things to help fight.
The fiber and so forth. Yeah.
So it seems like, going back to Daniel, there's a couple of interesting things going on here. One, he recognizes, I'm about to be in an environment of education. So if I'm going to do better in this educational environment, I need to be eating this particular diet. But I also sit here and wonder, now that you're talking about this, is he also maybe thinking ahead and realizing, look, I'm in a place and time where temptation could be high. And so you go back to the last program where we talked about there are things that you can do to help build up your willpower, to help prevent you from falling into temptation. No doubt there were probably attractive women, and of course there's alcohol, and then there's all these things that he could get addicted to, so to speak. But I wonder if he was kind of thinking ahead and saying, you know what, if I indulge here,
it's going to make it hard.
I could fall later.
Yeah.
And as I read the book of Daniel, I don't think there's anything that the Bible says a single thing negative about him.
Yeah, no, you can't find anything.
If you see in Daniel 1, he said, Daniel already purposed in his heart. So even before he was faced with that, he already had the purpose to do right.
He made that decision. I'm going to, and that's a key point, that especially for anybody, but especially someone, we talked about overcoming addictions and so forth, and in the other, our other meeting, but the reality is there is something about making a decision. I'm not going to do this anymore, or I'm going to avoid this, and I'm not going to, certain things are better just to avoid altogether, because sometimes being moderate in them makes you a drug addict. It's like it'd be better just to avoid the drug altogether rather than be a drug addict. And so making that determination, I am going to avoid this. And we see what it's done in schools. They're talking about how when this is implemented, they said a school implemented this, and what happened? It almost eliminated absenteeism. It enhanced their performance in school, their performance in homework, and it almost eliminated teen pregnancies and violence. I mean, that is, so diet can literally transform people's lives.
And Daniel wasn't in this environment where it was just like, everything's all of a sudden happy now. I mean, he was taken from his home, taken from his parents. The only thing that he had there of familiarity was a few people that he knew, some of his friends. But it wasn't just like, hey, I'm going off to school now at Babylon U, and I'm going to study engineering or whatever. It was like, no, you're taken from everything that you've known, your whole environment, and now you're in a new environment. So stress is high. Certainly. And you would think the tendency for depression would increase
for sure
based on his circumstances.
Yeah.
And you think about it, he is in literal Babylon, and his story, as we look at it, teaches us how to live in spiritual Babylon. And the prophecies in Daniel talk about
at the end of time
what about spiritual Babylon,
that the world would be like Babylon.
And so as we look at his life, we can have an example for us how to live in Babylon and yet still be faithful to God. It's really a beautiful, like you said, there's nothing in there that tells us that he, was anything wrong, that he hadn't done anything wrong. Right now, he wasn't perfect, we're not saying that, but you don't see him in rebellion or anything like that, which, like you said, he had plenty of reason to be. He lost his family, never to see them again. He had all.
Yeah, it never shows him being spiteful or angry or lashing out at people or using his position of power to cut other people down if they, were to go against him. Nothing like that. You don't see anything. I mean, it's just like complete integrity the whole way through.
Totally. And one of the things we saw in the video is that he mentioned this study with a doctor by the name of Bieshold, who showed that when people go on a plant-based diet, they compared three things: a meat-based diet, a fish and vegetable source diet, and just plant source diet. The only group that has enhancing, their mental state, their cognition, their happiness was the ones who only were on plants. And one of the potential causative factors of the negativity of the animal foods is something called arachidonic acid, which is something that is in the animal foods that as we eat it increases inflammation in the body. More inflammation statistically leads to higher levels of not only depression, but also lifestyle diseases, heart disease, diabetes, and so forth. But Michelle, had you changed your lifestyle some years ago? Had you changed from like maybe an animal-based diet to a plant-based diet?
Yes. So
what happened?
I started to become on a plant-based diet when I came to the United States.
Okay.
And
from where?
From meat diet.
I mean, what country did you come from?
Oh, what country? From Indonesia.
Indonesia, okay.
Yeah. So, in Indonesia we eat a lot of fried food. So there's a lot of oils, meat, and everything. But when I changed to plant-based diet, I really feel the difference. I used to my endurance was bad, and right now I like to exercise and my endurance is better. And also I used to be underweight so I was unhealthy, and right now I actually become in a healthy weight. And you know, some people think if you go to a plant-based diet, you become skinny and unhealthy. But well, you know, I become better.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. Wow. You know, for me, when I went on like a whole food, plant-based like lifestyle, and before in high school, I could run a mile in 9 minutes and something, not a very good mile. But then going on a whole food, plant-based diet in my mid-30s, I gave it a try, and with very little practice running, I ran a mile in like 5 minutes and 50-some seconds, you know, which is no professional mile, but it's much better than it used to be, like, you know. And so it just is literally like endurance, what you stated. It increases your ability to endure. You feel it's just easier to breathe, and just your energy level goes up, and not to mention the happiness factor, which to me is even better than the endurance, although I love the endurance. That's a real blessing too.
So with that, the diet, like you said, gives you more energy to exercise.
Yeah.
And exercise is one of the things
That's
that
our
we
next
need
point. All right.
To overcome depression, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So you realize some people struggle to exercise, but could it be that they're eating the things that cause them to be sluggish, and
So
you
they
don't
don't
have
feel like
energy?
exercising.
Yeah.
You just, you're so
don't feel like
tired.
it.
So everything is like related.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very related. And like we said earlier, it's a synergistic effect. You can't just do one. You need them all together to have the full benefit.
Yeah.
And so depression, they actually show that, is it possible to run away from your depression, right? Can you run away from it? And they also show that exercise directly affects your gut biome.
Okay. Yeah, which I don't even know how that works. I mean, it's almost miraculous, because we know that eating certain foods, eating, you know, since there's a bunch of good bacteria on the fruits and vegetables, as you eat it, you know, they go into your system, and so you have additional beneficial bacteria. But exercise alone shows to increase beneficial bacteria in the gut, and it may be because it doesn't kill off certain bacteria. Maybe lack of exercise actually kills off bacteria, and maybe the exercise, I don't know, that's just surmising that may be the case. But the reality is you have more beneficial bacteria in your gut when you exercise. So exercise is a very important factor in our health.
So there's a study called SMILE, and that's Stanford Medical Intervention in Long-Term Exercise. And what they did is they had a 16-week trial, and they had 156 patients put into 3 groups, and they had a Zoloft group.
Okay. Which is a drug, a medication.
It's an antidepressant, right? And an exercise group, and an exercise and Zoloft group. So which group do you think would, just off the top of your head, which group do you think would do the best?
I'm gonna go with exercise.
Okay.
Just exercise.
Just exercise.
You know, that you know, I think just logically you would think maybe it's exercise and Zoloft, because like 1-2 punch, but we're gonna find out that you're actually right. Let's find out.
So the exercise group, you're right, did the best. So they had them exercise for 30 minutes to 70 to 85% of their target heart rate. You can look that up online to see what your target heart rate is.
For your age, what is your target heart rate?
So it was three times a week that they exercised. All had a drop in depression.
All 3 groups.
Sounds good. Nearly half of each group were no longer depressed, immediately after it. An additional 13% had less symptoms but were not totally depression-free, so still good. But 6 months later, the exercise group was doing the best. 55% of the mixed group, that was the exercise and Zoloft group, was depressed 6 months later.
Wow.
So 55% of them were depressed later, and 52% of the medication group were depressed.
So by the way, the worst group was the group that took the medication and exercised.
Isn't that strange?
You know, they did the worst.
Wow.
But only 30% of the exercise group
was depressed
6 months later.
So they did significantly better.
But again, mind you, if you do all these other things, maybe it would have helped them stay on their exercise program, right? Let's say you've never exercised before, and you start doing it, like, man, I feel so good. But then you go out to eat, and you eat all manner of things. Are you going to feel great to exercise the next day, no, you're going to be sluggish.
And the plant-based diet also helps hasten your recovery. So your recovery time is shorter. So that you don't have as, because if you're eating junky food too, you get really sore and you're like, man, that's why I never exercise, because you feel so terrible, But the good thing is when you do it regularly, your body begins to adapt to it and you're not sore all the time. So you don't have that terrible, and sometimes you even have a good sore. Like there's a good sore versus like that terrible, like, oh, my whole body feels bad. Like nobody really likes that feeling. But like just a little bit of soreness sometimes actually feels good,
So for example, we were talking about the Tennessee Titans, 15 of the players.
Which is the NFL team, that 15 players.
Yeah, so 15 of them are vegan during season. And when you hear them talk about it, they'll say things like, my recovery time is so much better. Like I recover so much better than when they're on a meat-based diet, then their recovery time is longer. So I bet you these guys could play a lot more than 16 games in a season, right? If
or
their recovery
a longer
time,
career, more
or
likely,
exactly.
because they heal faster.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and for them, I mean, they've only got a limited time where they're in their prime, and they're doing all these things to really decrease their prime.
Yeah, they are.
So if they can extend that, I mean, it's just money in the bank for them.
Totally.
So most people will exercise because they think they're going to lose weight, but that's actually not the best thing.
Not the best way to lose weight. Exercise.
So look at how many miles do you have to walk off a pound? How many miles would you have to walk?
Do you have to walk to knock off a pound? Do you have a guess?
Oh, wow. Let's see. Boy, I'm gonna say like
42?
20.
So
wow,
it's
right in the
between
middle.
the two. So it's between the two. It's 35 miles.
Okay, 35
so
miles.
if you want to lose a pound just by exercise alone, you need to do 35 miles of exercise. So it's more than a marathon. So like a marathon isn't good enough. You have to run or walk or run 35 miles. And so people don't think about the physics of it, but walking and running cause the same amount of calories. It's just faster running because meaning like it's about mass. How big are you and how far are you moving that mass? So like a mile of run versus a mile of walk sheds about the same amount of calories.
Right.
It's just you do it faster when you run because you're running,
it
it takes less time.
Right.
Exactly. So
Right.
but still 35 miles. So that's like, I mean, if someone's going 7 days a week, which you should rest one day anyway, but nevertheless, if you did 7 days a week, you're talking like 5 miles every single day to lose a pound in a week. Yeah. That so that's not the best.
Like that, it seems like, well, why would I bother?
Yeah, it's like and how many people are if they're significantly overweight are going to put in 5 miles every day? I mean, it's not likely. So there's a better way, which is really changing to closer to a whole food plant-based diet. Your weight begins to shed unless you're adding a lot of refined things to the diet, like sugar or oil. Oil can actually keep you from losing the weight if you're eating significant, because it's very high in calories. So it's refined.
So in our Ancient Health documentary, one of the doctors talks about his wife. She's a dietitian, and she had this thing that she would tell her clients on losing weight. And she'd say, it's not what thou joggest, it's what thou hoggest. It's the calories that you're putting in. You can't, the amount of calories people put in, there's no way you can jog that off.
I mean, you can lose a little, but you're not going to really make a significant impact.
You just can't use all that energy up, and so then your body stores it.
So we're not saying don't exercise.
No, we love exercise, actually.
Yes, exactly.
And mostly, though, for the cognition, for the benefit to that, yes, it's good for, just in general, exercise is phenomenal, but it's not the best thing for losing weight specifically.
Yeah, so we're really better off running or walking for our mental health.
Yes, than for weight loss.
Not to say that it's not good for our physical health.
Yeah, it is good
but if
for
we're trying to
health.
lose weight, definitely not.
It's not the main source of weight loss. Yeah.
But it does have a side effect that helps you lose weight, and this is willpower. It actually enhances your willpower, and so then you're going to control your appetite better and your decisions.
You're more likely to.
You're more likely to.
Yep.
So in that aspect, it can be, but it's not about burning calories. Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. How long have you been eating a plant-based diet?
So I went from a meat-based diet to maybe a vegetarian-ish. Vegetarian around 19 years ago. And you, how long?
More than that.
20-some. She's been in the 20-some year range. Yeah.
So here's the next question. Have you ever had trouble maintaining your weight since then?
So here's the thing. When I first became vegan, I actually gained probably, I'm guessing 5 to 10 pounds. And that was, I was much bigger than this at the time. I was probably about 30 pounds heavier. but I ended up, just side note, I had gallbladder issues, and so I had to really go on a low-fat diet, and you can reverse gallbladder issues on a really low-fat plant-based diet. You can actually get rid of stones by going on a whole food plant-based diet. So I went on that, and that's why I ended up losing weight. But your general vegan doesn't have to be, like you can be, like I said, this guy broke the world record of carrying, 1,100 pounds for 30 feet, and he's total vegan. So you can, depending on how much protein, how much fat you have, you can be bigger. For me, I ate a whole food plant-based diet, which got rid of my gallbladder issues, and also helped me in so many ways, from joint pain to migraines. Helped with the depression. So it helped me in so many levels. I happen to be thinner than I used to be, but I feel so good that I love it. Like, it's just such a good experience that, like, I don't want to let go of it.
Did you ever count your calories?
No, but I eat. People are blown away at the quantity of food that I eat, and my wife. They look at us little skinny people, and they're like, "Oh," but then they sit down with us, and they're like, "Do humans eat that much at a meal?" It's like people who are large people sit down with us, and we eat more than almost anybody. But the thing is, when it's whole food and nothing refined, and I mean nothing, like no oil, no sugar, no whatever. You can eat significant amounts because there's not many calories. People think, oh, potatoes make you fat. Nobody gets fat off potatoes. It's what do you put on the potato? It's like, okay, you put it, you put it in oil, deep fry it, and you blame the potato instead of blaming the fried potato, right? And so we blame the wrong thing many times when it's actually not that. And so, long story short, a whole food diet, just naturally you get thinner. It just happens. So, but
each of us has to work with what we have. So he had gallbladder issues. Well, it was because he was eating a high-fat, even a vegan diet.
I was eating a high-fat vegan diet. So I was eating a lot of like vegan butters and those kind of things. And then my grandfather died of a gallbladder surgery. Grandma had gallbladder surgery. My aunt had it, and now I'm struggling even on a plant-based diet with it because I'm eating a high-fat plant-based diet. But I talked with a doctor on our documentary, and she said, if you want to reverse that, you've got to change your diet. You got to cut out. And so for me, I'm not telling everybody else what they have to do, but if they struggle like I do with the gallbladder issues, it's something to consider.
Sure.
And most people just get it cut out. But me, I'm just a guy who I'd like to keep as much of my body if possible.
Sure.
If I had to have it cut out, it's like, okay, go under the knife. But if I don't have to, and I can just change a lifestyle habit, and here's the thing, you think, well, in the end, I love it. Like, I enjoy food just as much now as I've ever, actually maybe more than ever. And so even though it's different, it's only different for a time, and different becomes normal. So
have you completely cut out the oils?
I do on our own.
We travel a lot,
It's the same diet that's been proved. The only diet in the history of Earth that's yet been proven scientifically to reverse heart disease, to reverse the plaque in the diet, is not just a vegan diet, but it is a low-fat vegan diet where next to no oil or no oil has been the only diet that's been proven to be able to reverse heart disease. So like the Esselstyn diet or the Ornish diet or the McDougall diet, these kind of things are all basically whole food plant-based. And so we do. And for people who struggle with some things like us, some people, they'll live long eating oil, they won't be as bad. But for people like us, we, and it helped my wife out, it helped her with, what do we call it? Candida, it helped her with that also. And we actually eat a very high carb diet and a high fruit diet. We're not like only fruit. We eat veggies and nuts and grains and so forth. But eating a very high carb diet without oil is what actually got rid of her candida, which they generally say don't eat fruit and don't do this. But I've found very few people who get better on a candida diet. Candida diets seem to keep people stuck generally with candida. They say, oh, eat a bunch more fat, avoid the carbs, avoid the fruit, and they're stuck with candida. Whereas we did the opposite. We got rid of I could go on and on about the science of why, but we don't have time for that. Long story short, it worked for us. We shared this in Hawaii as we were with a group of medical professionals that invited us to come and speak on health, and or they invited us to come speak, and we were speaking. Lady came up, she tried the same thing. She had candida for years, tried the candida diet, high-fat diet, low carb, didn't work. Went on this, and it worked for her too. So
and she wrote us several months later, hey, it worked.
It worked. Wow. So awesome. But so we'll move forward.
We'll go on with the depression. So
back to so here we have exercise, is the last thing we talked about, the benefits of exercise. It's fantastic for reversing depression. It's actually probably one of the best things, to be honest with you. Next to diet, I think those two things, diet, exercise, and sleep, are some of the very best things you can do to reverse depression. But the next one is avoiding excess sugar.
Okay.
So it has been discovered that people who ate more sugar were more depressed, but the question remained, was it the depression that caused people to eat more sugar, or was it the additional sugar that was a causative factor in the depression? And people always have that question, right?
Yeah.
Am I depressed and I want to eat more sugary foods, or are the sugary foods that I'm eating causing my depression? A study from the University College London looking at more than 8,000 adults, followed them from the 1980s, discovered that men who ate the most sugar had a 23% higher likelihood of becoming depressed within the next 5 years.
Wow.
So if you eat refined foods, you're going to have that effect. In the brain, we talked about it in the other one, you know, it loves carbohydrates, but what kind of carbohydrates does the brain love? You know,
Fruits.
complete, you know,
Whole food.
Whole foods. That's the kind of carbohydrates, not refined foods. It does not do well with refined foods. And also, it says in Mind, Character, and Personality, Book 2, it says sugar is not good for the stomach. It causes fermentation, and this clouds the brain and brings peevishness into the disposition. So sugar, especially for brain workers, if you're sitting a lot and you're doing a lot of thinking, it's real important that you're giving your body the best food possible to have brain function. Also, so we talked about negative ions, light therapy, plant-based diet, 7.2 servings of fruit and 8.2 veggies. You know, this is all to overcome.
Can make you statistically higher. Every serving of fruits or vegetables, and well, I think, you saw that makes you happier.
And then, of course, we talked about exercise, avoiding sugar, and also cats in the house.
Now this is an interesting one. Wow. This is quite fat. Almost like I've never heard anybody talk about this, but research has shown that having cats in the house increases risk of schizophrenia and depression. Both of these things are because specifically there's a common parasite within the stool of cats called Toxoplasma gondii.
Yeah.
And I could tell you some fascinating research. They've done studies of a significant portion of the world has this parasite, like a significant portion. And people who have it, it increases their likelihood of having car crashes. It makes men more antisocial. And this is a strange one. It makes women more hypersexual, more open to men sexually. Strangely enough, this Toxoplasma gondii parasite that's in the stool. It's the same thing. The reason why they tell women not to have, don't
change the litter box.
Don't change the litter box when you're pregnant because
Right.
it can cause blindness and other issues to your child.
Okay.
And so basically, long story short, it can increase the likelihood. So studies have shown this. There was one study that was done by cat lovers, and I think for the purpose of showing that it wasn't true, that one study showed that it wasn't true. But the other studies seemingly show that there is a negative side effect to it, and so something to think about. Go ahead.
So if you pick it up, let's say you have cats in the house, you pick it up, and you have these higher rates of depression. How do you get rid of it? Because, does it just go away on its own?
If you already have the issue, you mean, maybe you have it and you've had a cat. One of the things I would consider, that's a good question. I don't know if any studies have shown this. So I can tell you one thing that is not, it's proven in a separate state to work for parasites. I can't guarantee it will work for Toxoplasma gondii. So they did a study in countries of the world that have a lot of parasites around the equator. A lot of those kind of places where it's warmer, tropical.
Sure.
Historically, what they would do, just kind of folk medicine, was they would take, when people had parasites, they found they had gut trouble, they would eat the seeds of papaya. And so many people don't realize that pharmaceutical corporations actually send employees to like these backwoods areas of the world, the Amazon or different areas to find out, and they'll ask people like, hey, when you get a headache, what do you do? And they're like, oh, we use this bark and we, suck on it, or oh, we eat this, and then what they do is they say, well, maybe there is something there. Let's do scientific studies to find out, is this just kind of like silly folk medicine, or is this legitimate? They really found out over thousands of years as the reason these people do it. So they put to the test in, I believe, the country of Nigeria, and they did a legit study on finding out. They took 60 children, relatively small study, but 60 children with established within their stool, they saw that they had parasites within their stool. It was a fact. They knew that. So they put them, they had a control group. The control group consumed honey. as the medicine, and the second group used honey and the dried seeds of the papaya, and so 3 grams of dried papaya seeds is what it was. So what they found is that the children, they divided them into 2 groups, 30 and 30. 30 of the children just took the honey, and they had it lowered the amount of parasites in them by 16.7%. The second group, which, hey, not bad. If just,
just honey.
Now, maybe they would have just got those out over time anyway. I don't know.
Yeah,
but the second group, or maybe honey, which would make sense. Honey is a kind of it's like an antibacterial kind of food. So maybe it did have an impact. But the second group, it got rid of 76, I think it's 76.6%, or right around there. 70+% it got rid of their parasites.
Wow.
So that's significant, and that was one dosage. So that was taking it one time.
That's
so
crazy.
Can I say for sure it will work for the parasiting cats? I don't know. It might. And so my thought, I've taken it personally because I travel internationally on a regular basis, been to, you go to a third world country, eat food, you get super sick. Did I get a parasite? I don't know. But it's like, hey, I could just eat some papaya seeds. Why not give it a try, right? And so I did, and so I've done that. So it's worth a try. I cannot guarantee, but I would not eat them all the time. I ate them for a while, and it's crazy what happens if you do it. Don't try it. You don't want to try it. It made me it's not. You don't want. So maybe try it once, maybe twice, but do not. Maybe you shouldn't even do it at all. I don't know. But one study did show it. So, but yeah, it's something to consider. And you could still enjoy your cat and let it be an outdoor cat and pet it or whatever, but having feces of an animal in the house might not be the best thing for mental health or
Wow. Okay.
But I know people get furious about that one, so we may see it in the comments section later on. I know people don't like that one, but hey, do whatever you want. We're not telling you what to do.
Yeah.
All these things are suggestions.
Just
and
suggestions.
People have to choose for themselves.
You do what
they
you want
wanna
with
do.
it.
Okay.
Also, avoid alcohol or any mind-altering drugs. This is real important because you want your mind to be in the best condition for making decisions, for not being down. You get down quite a bit from alcohol and drugs.
But just to clarify, once again, you feel better when you take them.
Yes.
You feel worse after they go away. So we're not saying you don't, the reason people do them is because they feel better. But it's that long-term effect of it that, you're empty the next day, you're depressed the next day. So yeah, it's avoiding them.
You smoke, you drink, you gamble, you get a hit of dopamine.
Yeah.
You feel better.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then it goes away.
It goes
you plummet further than where you were before you started.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then also, sleeping early helps keep pounds off and depression away.
And we already talked about that. So
9 p.m. being the best time.
If you really struggle with depression, I know 9 sounds so early, but if you would get in the habit of going to bed early and waking up early, it's very hard in the beginning, but if you really, really struggle with depression, it's something to really consider trying. It's worth a try, and you're not gonna get over your depression in a day or two with it necessarily.
Right.
So it's a process of time till your body adapts to your new schedule. You say, but I'm a night owl. I love staying up and I feel so good. But if you're depressed, a friend of ours who's a medical doctor, he has a saying, he says, the body does not lie. If you don't feel good, your body's telling you something is wrong. There's a great quotation where it says, I think it's in a book called Counsels in Diet and Foods, where it says, disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. In case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. Unhealthful conditions should be changed, then nature is to be assisted in her effort to expel impurities and to reestablish right conditions in the system. Meaning that disease is an effort of your body to tell you something is wrong. And once again, we feel like depression is totally psychological, and there is a psychological aspect, but I actually believe that in most cases, when we begin to live out healthy principles, the mind begins to just function better. We do have to choose. We talked in our last session about Bible promises, and every time we have negative thoughts or depressive thoughts or desire for drugs or whatever, we want to turn to the Word of God. Right. Having a Bible promise verse, the Bible talks about in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4 and 5, that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, they're not fleshly, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. So the Bible says God can bring every single thought we have into captivity. That's 2 Corinthians 10, 4 and 5. And he can bring our thoughts captive. Now, if we have good thoughts, we saw never forget that thoughts work out actions.
Okay.
Repeated actions form habits, and habits form character. So if we have healthy thoughts, and the Bible can help us when we have unhealthy thoughts for drugs or for illicit sex or for whatever negative aspect we have, or depressive thoughts, we can turn them to the Word of God. And as we do, God can help us bring our thoughts captive. We can say, Father, you told me you can bring every single thought I have captive to you. You can make us victorious. And that's one of the reasons we need to, keep our mind on God's Word. Jesus did that to overcome, and we can do the same.
Okay.
So that's why our last point, as he said, is give your life to Jesus.
Yeah.
Because he's the ultimate restorer, not only of body, but also of mind.
Yeah.
And
Jesus said he came to give us life, and to give us life
more abundantly.
More abundantly, meaning God wants our happiness. He wants what's best for us. And if we're struggling, sometimes, like when I was depressed, I felt guilty all the time. Every single morning, the very first thought I would have would just be just a guilty thought, like, oh, you did this, and I would try to make it right, or I did all kinds of things to try to make my life right, and just never felt right. And for me, it was a physiological issue. Once my stomach began to get better, once my gut issues began to get better, the depression just began to go away. And by the way, one side note, if you contact us on our website, anchorpointfilms.com, some people need to do a special diet called the Elimination Challenge diet, which is avoiding a bunch of foods that are many of them are actually good foods, but for temporarily avoiding them, because so it's basically getting rid of the common allergens for 1 month.
Okay.
And if you start to notice, like, wow, I'm feeling better, man, I have less achy joints, or my depression is going away, and I don't have migraines now, or various issues, like my arthritis is gone, which many people will find on the Elimination Challenge diet, and we send it to people free. But at anchorpointfilms.com, go to our website, contact us, and we can send you an email free on what the Elimination Challenge diet is, because many people have allergies to foods they don't realize.
Sure.
And when they avoid them for a month, what they do is so one of the foods is a great food, apples. Apples are fantastic food, great for your health, but it's one of the most common allergens in the fruit family.
Wow.
So when they avoid this fruit, most people, it doesn't affect them. Probably 99% of people are not affected by apples, but the 1% that is, they do better off without it, right?
Wow.
And so we're not saying it's a bad food. I think I'm growing apple trees in my yard, and I love apples, but I don't have a problem with them. But so you avoid a bunch of foods for 1 month, not forever, and then you add them back one at a time. And you see, like, let's say you add apples back, and now, oh man, like the next day you have achy joints, or you're depressed, or whatever, which is unlikely it's apples. It's very unlikely it's apples. But let's say you start feeling bad, then you take it out of your diet for a while again. And then you wait 3 days after eating it till you start feeling better again, or whenever it takes to feel better again. And then you add back the next food. And if nothing negative happens over the next 3 days, you can keep that food in your diet. Then you add the next one and next one. But if some of them show negative side effects, you try to avoid them for 6 months.
Okay.
And then you try adding it back again. And sometimes, the medical professionals say that it will actually reverse the allergy, like your body will heal and you can start eating it again. But in some cases you'll eat it again and you'll find out, nope, I just got to avoid it. So once again, that's more of an extreme case, but it's the kind of thing where, like, people are really diligent and willing to try. It's a way to do a free test on your own body.
Sure.
It doesn't cost you any more. You got to get groceries anyway. So
that's right.
Yeah. So something to think about. But just summing up all the things that we looked at is that these things, as we change our diet, as we look through all these things, negative ions, getting out in the fresh air, getting adequate light, in the summer you can get that don't get burned. We're not talking about burning yourself. Getting on a plant-based diet, we know that just removing, whether it's removing the meat out of your diet or even the fish, helps lower your depression within 2 weeks. We saw exercise, avoiding sugar, cats in the house, put them outside, and you can still, pet them or whatever, and have that nice experience and help them keep the mice and rats away from your house or whatever. Yeah. Avoid alcohol, good sleep, and giving your life to Jesus.
I just want to say one thing about the giving your life to Jesus. Chad mentioned earlier that that's one of the things that helped him. In this way, you know, he said it was a physiological thing for him, right?
Yeah.
And once he cured that, then all the spiritual stuff went away. He wasn't feeling the guilt and all that. But what I say is that had he not had his life in the hands of Jesus every day, he would have been much worse.
Yeah, I was spending time in devotions every single day, trying to make my life right with God. I was actually doing almost all of the rest of this. I was exercising, I was eating a pretty good diet, I was, you know, getting light, actually using Lightbox, and, you know, literally almost every single thing in here, although I wouldn't always go to bed on time, which is a significant factor. But then I changed to like eating significant amounts of fruits and vegetables like I talked about, and it really, like, it changed my life. I was already eating a plant-based diet, but not as good.
Not whole food.
Not whole food. And over time with that, got rid of the joint pain. It got rid of, like I said, migraines. It got rid of, and when I'm eating it very well, it gets rid of tinnitus, the ringing in the ears that I had. I mean, I had quite a few health issues, and it got rid of the depression, which to me was the most significant. Like within 2 weeks of, I did something extreme. I'll just share it with you. I don't think this is what most people need to do, but it worked for me since I had a real gut issue. And most people probably shouldn't do this, to be honest with you. But I read a quotation about basically the food God gave Adam and the benefit it had, you know, like in his sinless state, what he ate, which was a total plant-based diet, largely a fruit-based diet. So for 2 weeks, I just ate fruit. And within 2 weeks, my depression began to go away.
Totally gone.
Yeah, and it was incredible, and but most people, I don't think that's their issue. Most people weren't eating as well as I was before that time. I was eating, to be honest, a very, very healthy diet, but eating that way for me. But that's because I had specific gut issues from living in Iceland and having stomach trouble there. So most people, it's not like that. But a very short-term fruit diet for a day or two or a few days, followed by adding in the veggies like we showed in our last episode, you can find that very same benefit. But otherwise, what would be more important for most people, if they really, really struggle still with a plant-based diet, would be to consider doing the Elimination Challenge diet. So that's something to consider also.
It seems like if you were having trouble with any one of these, you know, you would maybe want to hone in on one of those aspects.
That's
say,
right.
Man, I'm not getting enough sunlight. I'm not getting enough fresh air.
Totally.
Like, I know us working in this environment that we are, it's like we're indoors most of the time, especially in the winter. It's like you come to work and it's like almost dark. You
and
get
it's
off
dark
of work
when you leave.
It's dark.
Yeah.
So you're almost, we don't have any windows in here. So it's like, we're probably not subjecting ourselves to the best health because of that.
Yeah.
But I know for myself, I'm really diligent in like other areas to kind of fight off some of that. You know, I'm like really regimented with my water, really regimented with my food.
Yeah.
I was exercising really regularly just about a month ago, and then I fell off the bandwagon, so I need to get back on that. But you know, all these things. It's interesting when you were talking about how a lot of these things just shed. The analogy came to me, like when people come to Christ, they describe the same kind of experience. You know, I came to Jesus and all this guilt and shame and all these things that I had just completely went away. And it's the same thing with the health-based principles. You know, like we come to God in that aspect and we say, Christ, you know, I'm yours. I want to treat my body the way you've designed it. You know how it works. So when I come to you in that and lay all that at your feet, all these things shed away, whether it be pounds, anxiety, depression, what have you. It just falls away.
Yeah, and the great thing about it is too, because sometimes when people hear Christians talk about healthy eating, they think, oh, you think you get to go to heaven based upon what you eat. No way. Like, you can't go to heaven because of what you eat. But the closer you get to the diet that God made for man in the beginning, because he said, all my commandments are for your good, right? So all the things I give you, they lived in the Garden of Eden, right? The word Eden in the Hebrew language means pleasure. It was the garden of pleasure. So the food that he gave them was best designed for their pleasure. The work he gave them was best designed for their pleasure. And they've done studies on all of this. We know that a plant-based diet lowers depression levels. We know that gardening lowers levels of depression, lowers likelihood of having dementia. It lowers your weight. It does, like, it is one of the most psychologically and physiologically beneficial things you could do is gardening.
Sure.
You know, and it fits. This is what God said. So it's not that God says, if you don't garden, you don't go to heaven. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the closer you get to implementing the lifestyle that God gave in the beginning, makes you happier, healthier, and it maybe just enjoy life better. So it makes our time here while we are here on earth, you know, something that we can enjoy more and we can be a greater benefit to people around us.
Talking about peak performance.
Peak performance, that's a great way of saying it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just one more thing, going back to the whole, when he was in the depths of his depression, he said it was 10 years and 8 of those was like seasonal, but the last 2 was full, you know.
The whole year?
2 years.
2 years solid.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he was really struggling at that point, but he would go out and spend time in nature and pray and study and everything. And he got to the point where he thought, what if I have to live with this the rest of my life?
Wow.
And he contemplated, he said, well, then I guess I'm just going to have to do that, because where would I go?
I'll just accept it.
I'll just accept it. He says, where will I go? Jesus, you have the words of life.
Like, I knew Jesus was the answer, but I didn't feel it.
Yeah.
You know?
Sure.
But that's a good thing to remember too, is that our salvation is not based upon how we feel. You don't go to heaven because you feel like you're going to heaven. You go because Jesus died for you and you trust in him, even if you don't feel it.
Right.
You know, you may not feel saved, but, and looking back on it after gaining victory over depression, I look back and I don't believe I was lost to that.
Right.
You know, I just didn't feel saved. So the good news is, and so, you know, don't give up. One of the things I can say is, you may feel like giving up, you may feel like, listen, Jesus is the answer even if you don't feel it. Jesus, when he was going to the cross, he prayed to his Father when he was on the cross. He said, my God, why have you forsaken me? He felt completely lost. But the good news is Jesus rose up from the grave.
Amen.
And the reality is for us that even though we may feel lost, if we've given our life to Jesus, accepted him as our personal Savior, turn away from our sins, even if we feel lost, we can trust in Jesus anyway. So the good news is I didn't have to feel that shame and guilt for the rest of my life. I'm glad God helped me to get through it. But don't give up. Don't give up. Amen.
And he learned a lot on the way, right?
Yeah.
And that's what he always said, don't give up looking for solutions, because along the way you find something that will work.
And because I tried, you know, because people suggested, oh, you know, this, you know, take this supplement or take this. And I tried and nothing. So some people be like, just give up. But I kept trying. And I'm so glad I did, because I never would have found what worked for me. And I don't mean that one thing that worked for me will work so well for others. I think all the other things that I do with a healthy lifestyle actually did help me from getting too deep that it would have been overwhelming, right? So the other things, as we put these things together, as we said, there's a synergy. So something to try to really implement as many, obviously in one day you're not going to do it all, but start with one, add another, and just begin to work your way through.
Yeah, that's exactly what
it would feel overwhelming to do everything like this overnight.
It would.
Yeah.
It would.
So don't feel like you have to do it all overnight, but work your way. You could even write a list, put it on the fridge, and, you know, did I get my exercise today? Did I drink my water today? Did I get out in fresh air today? And like they said on the video, you go exercise outside during the day and you're getting sunlight, fresh air, it'll make you want to drink, you're getting exercise. I mean, you're getting, you know, 4 or 5 of these things in one fell swoop. So
not that we recommend overdoing the technology, but there are even apps that will help you build habits. You know, that's one actually positive use of technology that help track your water use and your exercise and help you form, you know, a new habit, you know, if you need to be outside every so long. So technology can be used for a benefit in that regard. Well, thank you, Chad and Fadia, for coming and sharing this. You can see the list. I would recommend that you start implementing at least one of these in your life. If you're noticing that you are depressed or struggling with depression and saying, man, I'm so down, how can I keep going? It's very much like the Christian walk. There are times of discouragement. There are times where you just don't know how you can keep going. But Christ tells us in his word, you know, that he who endures to the end, you know, will be saved. And it's not going to say that you're not going to struggle through that process, but there is an end, and Christ will help see you through it. So thank you for joining us. If you have any comments, leave them in the leave them below, and we will put the links for you about Anchor Point Films and the documentaries they've created also in the description below. And we just thank you guys for coming and sharing this information with our viewership and our audience. And don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell so you can be notified when the next video comes out. This has been LED Live, and we hope to see you next time. Take care.